Hello, I'm Victor Yalom, and I'm here in another episode of talking to psychotherapists and mental health experts around the world during the COVID crisis. And I'm very pleased to be here today with Giuseppe Iannone. He's a psychologist and psychotherapist in private practice in Milan, Italy, really operating at the epicenter of the COVID crisis there, which is my understanding, kind of the next hotspot right after Wuhan, China. So you guys are unfortunately ahead of the curve, and what you've experienced right there is what we are starting to experience now in the US and elsewhere around the world. So first of all, welcome and thank you for taking the time to speak with me.
Hello, Victor, and thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. So I want to really learn from you, and I think our viewers would want to learn from you since you've, as I said, you've a couple weeks ahead of where we are in terms of the crisis, and hopefully, hopefully we're not all going to have such a terrible experience as you've had in Italy, depending on, the results of our social distancing efforts and the like. But why don't you first just share with me what has been the impact, many impacts, but what have been some of the more profound or unexpected impacts that you have experienced and that you've observed your clients and society experiencing during this crisis?
I think we were not ready to face this pandemic. A lot of shops have closed. Streets are empty, and I guess you can see this on medias, when they show images from Italy.
Yeah, and we are experiencing that now in the US, of course.
All right. Yeah. So it's really like that. People are forced to stay at home. And like I said, I don't think we were ready for that.
Right. Yeah. So we're probably a little more ready because we've seen that happening in China and then Italy, but you were kind of at the forefront of that. So yes.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we have kind of underestimated it. We didn't take it very seriously in the first hand. And that's why we are paying the consequences for that.
Mm-hmm. Well, hopefully our leaders have learned a little bit from the mistakes Italy made, although that's inconsistent, depending on the country, the state, in the US, the city. Those social distancing measures have been applied inconsistently. And psychologically, how have you seen people react? What's been most difficult or challenging?
I think being confined at home has been pretty tough, especially for people who already suffer from any mental health. Apart from agoraphobia, of course, they are the happiest people in the world because they don't need to face their fears. They're confined at home, so they're pretty safe, or at least they feel pretty safe. But I would say people are experiencing more and more anxiety symptoms, panic-like symptoms, stress-related symptoms such as insomnia or hypervigilance, hyperarousal, and so on. And I'm thinking about all the negative effects that solitude can bring also on a social point, from a social point of view, not only from a psychological point of view. Italians are famous all over the world to be very sociable people. So, right now we feel like little islands, everyone has to stay on his own. Of course, technology is really helping us to stay in contact, although not physically, but at least, we can communicate with each other. So this kind of mitigates the negative effects of being isolated.
Yes. Okay. Now I know you've continued in your, private practice work. You've moved online, but you also told me previously that you have been involved in a volunteer effort of psychologists and psychotherapists doing free, maybe not psychotherapy, but brief check-ins with people. Tell me about that experience. How has that been for you?
Yeah, you're right. We are offering this kind of free services. Like you said, they're not really psychotherapy sessions, but I think people should not feel alone during this crisis. And if they know that they can contact a mental health professional, even for a quick check, I think this can mitigate the symptoms that
Yeah.
might arise, or even help them to feel less isolated.
Yes. What have you observed? What have you found you're able to do, even in a short kind of check-in call?
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit about that. How those have gone for you?
Yeah, usually people are very spontaneous in telling what's going on. They usually refer uh, symptoms of anxiety and of stress and of hypochondria, but they are kind of wave-like, which means they have very high spikes, and then for some reasons they tend to diminish over time, but then boom, the second wave hits again and they feel overwhelmed. Uh, my suggestion is, of course, we can give kind of good advices and tips to help people dealing with this. First of all, I would suggest them not to get overexposed to media talking about the emergency,
Yes.
because some people are really, kind of obsessed with numbers, how many people are dying, and of course,
There's
you have
something very There's something very addictive about it, or compelling to want to
yeah.
keep watching the media, keep listening, podcasts, video streams. But you say it doesn't. It may not help. In fact, it may do the opposite.
Yeah, in fact, the opposite is true, especially because numbers of people who are who are taking the COVID are getting higher and higher. That's why it doesn't help.
Mm-hmm.
So I would suggest mental health professionals to suggest patients, don't get overexposed to the influence of media when talking about the emergency.
Right. What else have you found that you've been able to do that's been helpful, even in a short, a short check-in with people?
Mm-hmm. It might sound even silly, but I would say listening. It's not banal because, like I said, some people live on their own, which means they cannot speak to anyone for days, especially people who have no relatives or families, or.
Mm-hmm.
So even lending a ear to these people and let them, talk and share what their feelings, what their emotions are, what their hopes for the future are, or to give them hope that this is gonna end eventually. All right, we don't know why, but it's not the end of the world. And this has a very powerful effect on people. And you can see this after really 20 minutes just, talking, they feel reconnected again. Because isolation, we know that, isolation can really alter feelings, emotions, thoughts, even behavior, so people can really start feeling desperate in a way. Being in contact with another human being bring them down to earth again.
Yeah, well, this goes back to the basics of psychotherapy: is the human relationship, the therapeutic relationship, and listening. And
Exactly.
even, you're saying, even if it's a 20-minute check-in with someone who you've never talked to before, you feel that that's helpful to people.
Yeah, yeah. And I would say this is a positive effect of quarantine. We are really starting to listening to each other, and to feel that we are on the same boat. We are all members of the human race. So, there's not rich or poor. We're on the same ship. We're on the same boat.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of people saying that and realizing that is, um, I think a positive effect. Obviously, the negatives greatly outweigh that right now, health
Yeah,
wise, mental health wise, economically. This is a terrible catastrophe,
yeah,
but there is some silver lining in that people are reconnecting and realizing that it's relationships that matter. That's what's important in life.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. We're not just made to work,
Yeah.
we can also enjoy our time with our relatives at homes, and we can be good to other people. It's very interesting to see here in Milan, young people helping elderly people, to do the grocery if they can't go out. So, uh, people are becoming very polite and very respectful to each other, which is striking to see in a city like Milan, which is very business oriented, so people run and work all day long, all year long, and being forced to take this break made them realize they are humans, they're not machines, so they're not just built to work, but they're also built to build social relationships.
Built to connect and built to love.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so shifting focus a little bit, what has this been like for you personally to be involved in your ongoing psychotherapy practice with your existing clients, but also this volunteer work where you're reaching out to many, many people and talking with them? How's that been for you? Have you learned anything? Tell me about your experience.
Yeah, I think I feel blessed in being able to help people, and it also when you help people, you help yourself in a way. We all know that. It also gives structures to our days, and it goes both ways. It's good for patients because we bring them on earth. It's good for therapists because keep on working forces us not just to think about ourselves, but also, keep thinking about others. So in a way, we can distract from ourselves for a while. I think most of the stress is due to the fact that we think too much about ourselves, So being able, even in desperate situations like the ones we're experiencing nowadays, is a way to help ourselves as well. Because the words we say to people every time we give an advice to someone, for instance, we are giving and repeating this advice to ourselves as well.
All right. Well, that's a really beautiful reminder. I think that's why all of us go into this work to one degree or other, is because we find we are compelled or we are drawn to want to help others through this through our field of psychotherapy, and we benefit from it. It's a way we make our living, but it's a way that we find meaning in our life. And it sounds like in a time of crisis, from what I hear you saying, this sense of meaning and purpose is heightened.
It really is. It really is, Victor. Yes.
Yeah, and also kind of, even though we are experiencing the same stressors that other people are, I mean, some of us are more protected, depending on our, do we have people in our immediate lives or ourselves that are sick or dying or dead, or do we have some economic cushion or not? Then that's going to determine to a large degree our level of stress. But what I hear you saying is being able to help other people during this time is helping you manage your own anxiety about this.
Absolutely. Yeah. Plus, I think we are realizing we can live with less. I mean, we live in a first world country, so it's not like we lack bread. We have plenty of food around us, and even if, all right, some people are not working right now, which means maybe they won't be able to afford their holidays this summer, but still, who cares? We have food on our tables. We are really understanding that we can live with less and be happy.
Yeah. Okay. Any advice you would have for therapists, in the rest of the world that may be a couple weeks behind you in terms of this crisis, reaching them in the U.S. and Europe and the rest of the world? Anything you've shared a lot, but any other points you would share with them?
Yeah, I would say get ready to hear a lot about symptoms of stress, symptoms of anxiety, symptoms of people who panic, who feel hypochondriac or who feel obsessed, like you said before, by numbers. So, stay human, of course, but be professional at the same time. Because if people still contact you and they don't contact a friend, is because a friend is not enough. Maybe when they call a friend, after the phone call, they're even more anxious because maybe their friend is more anxious than the patients themselves. So it doesn't help in the end. So stay human, but be professional. That's my ultimate advice, I would say.
Yeah, say a little more what you mean by being professional.
Being professional, don't forget, the friends to patients. Psychotherapy is an asymmetric relationship. And be very aware that some people will try to use you to get rid of their anxiety and to put those anxieties on you. Don't allow that, of course, because you need to work for long periods. So don't get too much overwhelmed by the stories that people might share with you, which might even be stories of death, like, I don't know, my parents died or my son died, which are very sad stories to hear, of course. So that's why I say stay professional. Try not to get over involved.
And
in what people share with you, which is what we do every day, actually,
Yeah. So, I mean, we all have, some people tend to internalize and take on the pain of their clients more and need to work on keeping a little protection, and other therapists need to work on engaging more. And we all have our own struggles to find that balancing act. But you're saying that that balancing act is intensified during times of crisis. So we need to know what works for us to take care of ourselves and to practice that. Obviously, there's no one size fits all in that regard.
Absolutely. Should you feel overwhelmed, take less patience or take longer breaks between one session and the other. These are all excellent ways to protect yourself in order to perform better. So even in this case, the less, the better.
Yeah, another thing I've noticed, I've seen organizations locally forming spontaneous community online Zoom sessions, or individuals. I would recommend they can form, consult groups if they're not already in a consult group. It's a great time to, find a few colleagues and have a time once a week where you check in with each other and do some informal peer-led consultation. I think that we need that more. I think that's always a good idea, but I think we need that more than ever right now. All right. Well, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to share your experiences with me and with our viewers around the world. So I'll let you get back to work, attending to the needs in your community.
I thank you, Victor, for the invitation, and big virtually hugs from Italy.